Welcome back to RoomPack's ResEdChat podcast. I'm your host, Dustin Ramsdell. If you're new to this show, this podcast series features a variety of topics of interest to higher ed professionals who work in and with college and university housing. We have a very interesting topic for today, one that came to us through the founder and sometimes host of the show, Paul Gordon Brown, just from his interactions out with just folks in the field, just doing the work and kind of doing some cool, new, interesting stuff. So I will leave it, we'll get to kind of exploring our sort of resident assistant belonging. Self-assessment is kind of the topic, kind of what all that entails and kind of the utility of it once we get kind of into the body of our conversation here today. But Ashtyn, if you want to introduce yourself briefly, your professional background, and then we'll get to it.
Yeah, thank you, Dustin. Thank you for having me. My name's Ashtyn Davis. I use both he, him, and she, her pronouns. I'm currently a graduate assistant, similar to that of a graduate resident director at the Office of Residence Life at the University of Oklahoma. I spent 4 years in student housing leadership at the University of Central Missouri. I also did some camps and conferences during the summer, where I helped our institution win the NACUR OTM Traveling Award for the first time in our school's history, which was pretty fun, and the first time in the last several years that a Midwest school in McCurr had won the award. I spent some time in student government, was an RHA president and an NRHH representative. I went to a lot of conferences, presented. During that time, it was all virtual conferences, but I still had a blast. I went on after graduation and worked at Georgetown University in Washington, D.C. before coming to OU, my current institution. In between my first and second year, so this past summer, I spent some time at the University of Colorado Boulder doing a cool white internship as a community center coordinator intern, working with residence life, camps and conferences, as well as housing.
Yeah, you've done all the things. I feel like again, you could have had all these sort of the terminology of residence education, everything there, which is great. Yeah, I mean, like a variety of roles, variety of institutions, and I'm sure that all sort of fed into your kind of professional perspective when you created this tool, the resident assistant belonging self-assessment, or RABSA, however we'll kind of refer to it here. But I think it's just a really interesting thing that I could certainly just on its face, by the name of it, kind of see sort of the benefit and the utility of it. But we'll start out just if you want to explain what it is and how it came about.
Absolutely. So it's kind of a long story. I'll keep it somewhat short while providing some details in it. So I was in one of my master's classes, Introduction to Research, in spring of 2023. And I was the only residence life graduate in that program or in that class. And I was really struggling to come up with, we were doing a quantitative assessment or research prospectus. And I was really struggling. I was like, hey, I don't know what to do or how to tie this into my program to make it useful for someone who's going into this full time, starting the summer. So I met with the a colleague at the University of Texas, Dallas, um, after I did some research and was like, "Hey, I found this really interesting article from I don't know where the article was from, but it was from 2015. It was a student had lost their life due to some negligence in that whole situation. And after spending some time reflecting, I was like, "Hey, I really want to focus on community and belonging." After really seeing this, reading this article, seeing some research, and reflecting over my own experiences, um, so I titled my prospectus "Rebuilding the Bridge Between Community and Belonging." So you'll hear that in my article in RoomPact. I utilize the term "rebuilding the bridge between community and belonging." So it's something I say a lot. I have it on my door at work, so I utilize it a lot. So I made a presentation for my class, and then I was like, "Hey, I want to do this at conference, the SWCOOL annual conference this month." So I spent the last year creating this presentation, and then I met with one of our assistant directors at the time, now our director of our residence life program at OU. I said, "Hey, I'd like to get some feedback on this." And one thing that came out of that meeting was to have something physically tangible that the RAs can take out of spring 2024 RA training. So, about 2 months ago, I did some research into RA belonging self assessments. I was trying to find some sort of true colors, kind of cool assessment that wouldn't take a lot of time, maybe 10 minutes, 12 minutes at max, um, and kind of help the RAs do a self assessment of, did I learn something about myself? Is there something new that I can take away from this presentation? So I created this. Couldn't find one, so I made one. So the last couple of months, I've been working on refining this. And for those who are our video watchers or listeners, this is what it looks like. Um, to me, it's flipped upside down, but it's a one page, and then on the back, it has if your highest score is in this section, this section, this section, here's what it means. And there's what I call composite scores. So you do some math at the end. There's some instructions in there, and composite score is the greatest thing. That's the bread and butter of this assessment. So the assessment is broken up into three parts: community impact, recognition, support, and personal fulfillment. Each section has 6 statements that are mainly, all but one is mainly an I feel, I believe, I perceive type of assessment, type of statement. So the RAs will rank on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being strongly disagree, 5 being strongly agree, and 3 being that neutral. Each of those 6 statements. They'll add it up for each section, and then they'll have a score to kind of reflect on. The composite score is has a range into to 3 ranges. So anything that's 1 to 14 is considered a low range. Anything that is 15 to 24, very large, broad scale of experiences in there, is a mid range. And anything between 25 and 30, sometimes more than 30, is considered the high range. Now, to recognize that the mid range has some kind of middle experiences, those who score 15 experiences are going to look way different than a 22, 23, 24, or 25. So, what I did in this algorithm on the spreadsheet, which is so cool, I created sub ranges to kind of categorize them. So, in the spreadsheet that I have, um, I put all the data in there, and then it highlights them all in red, green, and yellow. Green for high, yellow for mid range, and red for low. And then it has sub ranges colors. And then what individuals can do, departments could do, is select uh, a kind of VLOOKUP system where they click, oh, I got a score that is low in personal fulfillment. What can we do about that? I have another tab that goes into targeted interventions, and that pulls that data. So then you get some ideas of, hey, I have a couple RAs who are low on recognition and support. How can I help them feel like they belong more in the at the specific moment, so that way their scores go up? In a large term, broad sense, we could utilize this in departments of seeing, okay, this is a quick snapshot at what our department is like. And is there themes that we're going to look for? Is there a way we could tie it into curriculum? That sort of thing is what can be super useful for it.
Yeah, and I appreciate the kind of thorough explanation, and clearly, I think just the you know kind of deep amount of work that went into it, because I think it is that idea that this is a very, I guess, simple on its face kind of concept or idea, but then gets very complex as you like get into it of just what does it truly mean for someone to have a sense of belonging, because like you said, it's like you know you can be a part of a community of like your fellow RAs, but then are you maybe just like assimilating, just kind of doing what you need to kind of get by, or can you truly have that sort of authentic self show up and belong and all that? And there's a lot that goes into that, like recognition, some of those examples that you gave, and all that. But and I think what I was going to say too is like I imagine that if any department is doing something right now, I certainly hope it is as, thorough as this, but it might be relying on, once a term kind of surveys that are just saying like, rate your level of agreement. Like, I feel like I belong. And it's like, cool, they gave a 3 or 4 or 5 or whatever. And like, maybe they left a comment or something, but it's like, you'd want to have this kind of get that sort of like composite, you know, you get the parts and the sum of its parts, like you get to know like, okay, you got this score and why did you get this score? Not just okay, this person wrote, 4 out of 5 of I feel like I belong on a staff or something. So that's certainly where my mind was going is it kind of honors, I think, the earnest desire of any departmental leader to make sure that all of their, RAs have that sense of belonging and kind of doubles down on to say like, well, let's kind of uh, give that complex concept its sort of due diligence and the focus it deserves. So uh, with all that to be said, I mean, you certainly gave a powerful example. I mean, like this, you know, a lack of a sense of belonging can have certainly some dire consequences. So uh, on the positive side, what do you hope is like the impact that a department would see of using an assessment like this?
Absolutely. And I did this presentation in spring 2024 RA training about 4-ish weeks ago, and I had some RAs. I had 14 RAs, so I collected some sample data out of them, and I have the data. I'm going to present at this conference, so I'm not going to spoil it too much for our Spakuo listeners. But I had some cool data that came out. Again, 14 folks who took this, so it's not 1,000 or several thousand, but what we really learned, and I had some RAs who said, "Wow, Ashton, I really learned something about myself in this." So, one, from the RA perspective, we want them to learn something about themselves, just like taking an Enneagram or True Colors or a Five Voices or a Clifton Strengths. We want them to take something and learn something about themselves for their perception of their belonging. At a departmental level, we want to hopefully utilize this. My plan, my goal is to utilize this as a full-time staff as I go into my role as a hall director this coming up academic year and collect some more data so I can say, okay, I have enough data to say this is meaningful and impactful. And then utilize that at the department level and say, okay, is there a difference between, let's say, a campus has a west side and an east side, or north and south, or they have different areas of their uh, residence life program? So, is there differences? Is there trends? I would love to do it post. This is like nerd me. Would love to do it like post RA training, 4 weeks into the semester, 8 weeks into the semester, and 16 weeks into the semester, and then track everyone's data and see, are there common themes? Is it specific to my practice as a first year? And is it going to change next year? And then let's do it again in the spring, post RA training, 4 weeks, 8 weeks, 16 weeks. And then for those who are curriculum based schools like OU, we can start to take that and then start to graph it and see, okay, are there moments where already seeing more support in the semester or more recognition? And how can we tie that into our curriculum eventually into creating this better residential experience for folks?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely wanted to ask like some ways that you envision this being used, and I'm glad you gave some of those examples because I think that's really smart. Like, and just also like, I mean, just general kudos to you for like sort of connecting these dots of just again like your background, your experience, and your sort of you know uh, classes and everything. Because I think this is a very great way to connect kind of the theories and that idea of everybody kind of acknowledging and student affairs or higher ed or residence life, that idea of community being important, sense of belonging being important. It's like, okay, what's a very tangible kind of active way that we can do this, and especially for RAs who are under a lot of stress and have to be kind of expected to kind of foster this for others. It's like, like you said, it's like they're going to be learning and growing as much from this sort of endeavor and utilizing a tool like this as it might help them to sort of have some better tools for their supporting their students. But even the idea that like you know it being fodder for just the way that you run your team, the way that you run that kind of the department, the way that you approach, training and ongoing professional development and all those sort of things. Like it, just gives you that continuous feedback loop and, uh, doesn't just rely on, once a term, all staff training or something to just sort of like have things kind of have too much of a time lag and yeah, you can see that change over time. Uh, and I guess this could be just one clarifying question, because I guess that idea of like doing it, uh, you know, repeatedly throughout a term to get those sort of uh, kind of benchmarks throughout that period of time, how involved, I guess, is taking the assessment itself? Because I think that's always the balance. You might be like, I want to get all these data points, I want to get all these questions answered, but it's like, well, we probably should also like do it more frequently. Like the frequency is better than like the depth or something. So like, what was sort of that balance like? I guess so that it's not this sort of exhaustive kind of exercise to go through, so that you could do it more frequently, over time.
Right, and I did this in our presentation, and I took maybe 10 to 12 minutes to complete, and it's a physical assessment. So it's a sheet of paper. I have folks sit down, write the scores, add them all up, and I had them calculate the composite score so they could see for themselves. But I have the algorithm that calculates composite scores automatically. So all I need is their three scores, and I can calculate the composite scores in a spreadsheet and then point them on a graph, and then take the graph and utilize that at a conference. But like you mentioned, we don't want them to take this long, super 100 question assessment where it takes them a couple, maybe it takes them 30 minutes or an hour. But this assessment's only, it's 30 statements, and it takes about maybe 12 minutes at max to take the assessment and then calculating all up the scores. And then I had a Qualtrics form, and then I just had the RA submit their all their completely anonymous, submit all their data in there, so then I could pull that data and graph it for my staff. And for the future, if we're utilizing this in a department, or if I'm utilizing this as a hall director, I would love to have everyone's names and potentially their communities if it's more than one community, and then be able to keep all that data in an Excel or in a SharePoint, and then be able to kind of look at that as we go on.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. And it's one of those things too, like you said, it's like, like, yeah, it should take you like maybe like 10, 15 minutes or whatever. Like, and that idea that it's like, 30 questions, and it's like, yeah, you shouldn't be overthinking this. Like it is like with any of these kind of like self-reported things, it's like, what's kind of just the initial reaction that you have to the statement or whatever. So it's like, let's not, make this more complicated than it needs to be. And I think yeah, even just to kind of reinforce the point, that idea that you could have a tool like this that, for a community of residents, like, I don't know, and this is just for me, like, as the layperson, sort of like from the outside looking in, it is like one of those tough things of like, how do you try in a very clear, concise way, like capture like, a sense of belonging and all that. You might say like, oh, people are like coming out to events or whatever. Like there could be some like kind of proxy measures, I feel like. And, and this feels like, I guess it's like, it's more emotional that you could sort of weave into like these more quantitative measures of like how many events do like people attend, how many people come out to each event or something. And, you know, it being like, oh, well, resident, X just never comes out to events. Like, I guess they don't feel a sense of community or belonging, whatever. It's like, maybe they do. Maybe they're like playing video games with their floor mates all the time, and they're doing what, like, and they just don't want to come out to like event, whatever. So that idea that you can kind of ask pointed questions, that get to like the core of what it means to have that sense of belonging and community and everything. And, that could, uh, I think, be flexible, to a variety of people and everything, I think is, yeah, it's just really great. And I'm glad that you have a history of like getting out there and talking shop and presenting about things. You'll continue to do that with this tool, because I think it's really great. And I'm glad that we can kind of help kind of signal boost what you're doing there as well. And yeah, I mean, this is, I think, just the amazing part of folks like yourself, when you're going through an academic program, getting that sort of like research lens, or the very analytical and theoretical base to the work. You could just sort of get that shot in the arm and kind of really be empowered to uh, just kind of elevate the work. So um, we're going to pivot here a little bit, because I always try to do a little bit of research on our guests, find a little interesting thread to pull and see how it all kind of, blends together or sort of like feeds on itself here. But you're currently in addition to the things that you do right now, interning with the United States Department of State. Uh, what has that been like? I guess, and maybe even like, how did you find it, or how did you seek it out, or whatever? I guess you mentioned that you interned at an institution in DC before, but how do you see it all kind of intersecting and interweaving together in both like your master's program and your work as an RD?
Absolutely. So this is kind of a funny story. I was on LinkedIn a year ago, and I found this. I found this. I was like, oh, this is kind of cool. My students would love this. And I have a lot of international students at the time, and I had a lot of political science people. And I said, hey, they might love this, so I'll repost this and I'll drop the link in the chat for people who are interested. And then I realized, wow, I'm also a student and I also kind of am interested in this. So at the time, it was called Apply in July. That was the theme. Now it's Apply in February. So applications are currently open. But I was like, wow, this is kind of cool. So I applied to a bunch of places. I was rejected by all of them except one. I had interviewed with the U.S. Department of Agriculture, the USDA, and with their training and development in HR. And then I ended up switching over to the US Department of State in the spring. So just about a month ago, I switched over. I'm now working with the program coordinator. So I do public relations and project management. And I err more on the project management side of the internship program. So I'm working a lot with our Handshake account. I just checked the data. We're on Handshake posted to 1,353 institutions that have Handshake accounts, and we sent it about 1,600 institutions, all that have Handshake accounts. And that equates to about 12 million students and alumni. So I looked up the largest NFL stadium, which is MetLife in East Rutherford, New Jersey, and their population capacity is 82,500. And how many stadiums would it take to fit 12 million in there? It's 145 stadiums. 145 times we could fill with all the people who have access to this. That's only on Handshake. So it's quite interesting the amount of people that we have access to, and we started at 195 institutions. So when I locked in and started working on as a project management intern, I was able to get it all the way up to 1,300 and I think 25 institutions that have it posted. So that's been pretty cool. Currently working on some assessment data. So I do work on assessment in my internship with federal employees. So I collect for our speed networking. We just had two events this morning where I was doing some stuff with speed networking, getting interns to get to network with public diplomacy, careers in government, working on economics or political affairs. So a lot of collaboration with reaching to external partners. So as an RD, I have to collaborate or have to, but uh, I get to collaborate with other departments on campus. So being able to have those skills of reaching out to someone in the White House, when reaching out to different folks through email and minding my communication skills through that, I think is super important. I reached out to some folks that I used to work with who are now in career advising, and we're putting together federal and standard resume workshops. So getting to reach out to folks at the University of Arkansas, the University of Missouri Kansas City, and the University of Central Missouri, where I did my undergrad at, uh, and kind of getting them all together to create a panel to answer some Q&A for staff. Working on our virtual kind of ceremony, award ceremony, and doing that awards process for our two awards. So that's similar to things we do in residence life on awards and recognition committees and kind of soliciting nominations for end of the year banquets. So when we come up with things like rubrics, all stuff we use in residence life to grade awards and to vote on them. So something at face value, we see like Ashtyn's a Department of State intern. That's kind of interesting, but you would think there's not much correlation, but there is a lot of correlation and overlap of communication, project management, and collaboration that comes from the State Department and can directly translate into my work as a resident director.
Yeah, I mean, I was gonna say that. It's like, well, yeah, that's why it stood out. Is I felt like it was like I'm curious how this all connects, and you have made that very clear. So I appreciate that, and that's amazing. I guess to clarify, because like, you sort of stumbled upon it in a sense, and then definitely work to kind of expand the scope. I guess like because were they utilizing a tool like Handshake before, and or maybe not fully utilizing it or something? Like what was that sort of, I guess just as somebody who like I have known of Handshake and just it being like a great ed tech tool out there. Like what was that sort of like, I guess, from like when you had applied and then originally it seems like you're on the other side.
So yeah, when I had applied, I went and applied directly to the site. So those who are at institutions currently who it's not on their Handshake account, which is 101 institutions, and I can name most of them, but not gonna do that. It is an unpaid internship, so I do work 10 hours a week on top of my graduate studies, on top of having a dog, and as a grad, so I am very busy, but I thrive in this environment. But yeah, we were using Handshake, but it was not a primary kind of component to our recruitment. So I have a lot of extra time as a grad student, so I utilize that and I sit here all day and try to, or when I have time, try to post it to as many schools as I can, and I check every day to make sure that there's not more institutions that have gotten Handshake, and continuously to post them, so that way more students have access to this program. And I would encourage grad assistants, and I wish I did this in undergrad. I think it would be so amazing to have like 5 years, 6 years of experience with the State Department. But there's like DoD, the Department of Defense, the National Forest Service. There's people in PR. There's people who are data analytics. There's biomedical engineering internships. So it's a really awesome program for folks to get involved with. So I'm super excited to always talk about it. But that's how I kinda saw it, was on LinkedIn, then went into the site, applied, got rejected by almost all of them, but then ended up finding a really great internship and then transitioned over to being in the State Department.
Yeah. Well, it's great that yeah, you're singing its praises and you're helping to amplify its reach and impact and everything. And yeah, it does sound like it'd be a really amazing opportunity for students. And then I'm like glad that, our government is benefiting also from like all these amazing up and coming students and stuff who are able to give their skills and passion and everything to all those variety of different type of things that you mentioned. And yeah, I mean, and it's like that idea of, the time and place you are in your life and kind of like filling your schedule and all that, where it's just like, yeah, like it might not really, there would never really be another time where, you could do this, or just like one of those kind of unique uh sort of privileges and benefits of like being a student where there's like opportunities like this that are afforded to you. And yeah, I'm glad that you were just helping to expand that reach, because I think it's just, a testament to, you found your opportunity through LinkedIn, and then that like now through Handshake, that's kind of their jam is kind of doing that same sort of thing, more oriented towards higher ed and everything. So yeah, that's great. And I think yeah, just so many great connections. And I think that's like the idea too of like, no matter what someone like an RA does, or like an RD, there's so much transferability, and that like you've kind of recognized that, and really empowers you to go wherever you are going next. Which leads me to my final question. We're recording this February 2024. I believe you are approaching graduation very soon. We'll end on just kind of an optimistic, forward-looking note. What are you looking forward to as you approach graduation?
Yeah, I'm first of all looking forward to not having to take classes anymore. So but with that comes like the negative side of I have to become an actual adult and paying off student loans, car payment, not having to pay rent, but having to kind of transition from this graduate assistant part time work and then transitioning into full time work. Um, and I'll be heading to Texas State University as a residence director. So I made the announcements on LinkedIn. So it is official. I'm going to Texas State University. and being a residence director. So I'm super excited to be staying in Swakua, staying in the Southwest region, and getting to experience some new changes and working at Texas State, be able to expand my impact and positive impact in the community. So one, getting done with classes. Two, transitioning into adult life and being able to, I guess, make more, but also be able to have more time in the residence halls and create a larger impact as a full time staff member. And then advising, I think, is always something I look forward to. Like I mentioned in the beginning, I spent some time in RHA, NRHH, Hall Council, McCurr, NACUR. I used to be on the annual conference team back in 2021. And I really look forward to being the advisor now in those spaces. So I had the opportunity to co-advise when I was doing my internship in Colorado, and I absolutely loved it. I was like, "This is my butter. This is my jam." I get to now be the advisor for students and be that person who I had. I had great advisors in undergrad, and now I get to hopefully be that great advisor for my student staff and for hall council, community council, RHA, NRHH, whatever it may be, and getting to create that impact on students over the next couple decades to come.
There you go. Yeah, that's great. You got a bright future ahead of you. I'm glad you got everything kind of lined up, and you can, I feel like take your victory laps over the next couple of months and enjoy graduation and all that good stuff. And I think that is, where you're at, where it's kind of the graduate program version of sort of like senioritis, where it's like, oh, I'm a couple months away. I'm good to be done with classwork and everything. And it's like I know for me, like I get the itch occasionally to like, oh, let me like take a little course here or there and keep kind of keep that energy going. But just the idea of being so immersed in that program, like clearly you have gotten a lot of great inspiration around sort of the research and assessment and valuation and all that kind of stuff that's sort of empowering your work. And you're just gonna hustle over the finish line. And best of luck as you get everything wrapped up and make the kind of travel down to Texas and everything. And yeah, just thank you so much for creating this amazing tool, sharing it out. Not hogging it all for yourself, being so generous, and jumping on the show here to talk all about it. It's been great.
Absolutely, thank you for having me, and I'm happy to share the assessment to other institutions if they would like to reach out. I have the assessment and the algorithm, and hopefully there's more to come.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, ways to connect with you and your work for Impact and everything down in the show notes. So, yeah, just thanks so much for your time.
Of course, thank you for having me, Dustin.